Hello all, and thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone enjoyed yesterday's event, and for those tuning in just for today, we have another great lineup of speakers for you to discuss Saudi Arabia's construction market. So just to recap on yesterday, we heard from experts on how Saudi Arabia is progressing with sustainable development from the likes of AESB, Qatar, and Kundal. And then we closed our conference hearing from three of Saudi Arabia's multi-billion-dollar projects in Amala, Diriyah Gate Development Authority, and NEOM, as well as one of the world's leading interior contractors, DEPA Group. So we're going to begin day 2 of our Leaders in Construction KSA Summit with our Future of Construction in Saudi Arabia panel, which will discuss how the kingdom has changed over the past 10 years in terms of gender diversity and the acceleration of entertainment projects, as well as looking into the Vision 2030 agenda. So joining us today is 4 prestigious names from the region's construction sector in Mott MacDonald's Managing Director, Christopher Seymour, the Head of Middle East for Reed Smith, Sachin Kera, HK Partner John McKevitt, and Riza Gulf Scaffolding General Manager Ash Arshad. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the panel this afternoon.
Thank you.
Good to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
No problem. And as always, for those watching, I want to give you a brief introduction for each of our panelists today before we begin. So Christopher Seymour has more than 25 years experience in the industry and manages the 1,300 strong Mott MacDonald operation in the Middle East and has worked in most of the major cities in the region over the past 10 years. Sachin Kera has a significant amount of experience in advising government and the private sector on privatized and publicly procured infrastructure and development works, particularly across the Middle East and India. John McKevitt heads up HKA's Bahrain and Eastern KSA regions and leads commissions on HKA's most complex and technically demanding claims assignments, frequently advising on claims and commercial matters on major projects within challenging environments. And finally, Ash Arshad has over 20 years experience within the construction and industrial sector, delivering revenue enhancement across areas such as scaffolding, formwork, powered access, and mast climbers. I've given the introductions, let's dive straight in. So Saudi Arabia is one of the countries within the Middle East and actually across the world that is gaining a lot of interest for its development as a nation. So from the introductions, guys, it seems that you all have spent quite a considerable amount of time in Saudi Arabia over the years without making you all sound too old. So tell me, how much has Saudi Arabia construction industry changed over the past decade? Ash, perhaps you can start off with us. Tell us a little bit about this. You spent quite a lot of time in Saudi Arabia. Have you been amazed by how much it has evolved?
Yes, I think there's a real tangible difference within the last couple of years even. There's a kind of, irrespective of the fact that the market is quite tough and tight at the moment, there is a kind of optimism, there is a kind of change in the outlook of the way people are perceiving projects to come along and how they want them to be governed and carried forward. So I think even with the people working within those sectors, whether it's industrial or whether it's construction, there is still, regardless of current situation, there is an optimism that things are improving, systems are improving, modern methods are being looked at, new initiatives are being put in place. There's an encouragement for female participation. So all these things are definitely having an effect, and it's very visible.
Absolutely, and John, as obviously you head up HKA's Eastern, Saudi Arabia regions. What have you noticed during your time at HKA? What's been the change and progression?
In my experience, I've seen a dramatic change in development, even over the past half a decade. We've got public transport systems that were never there before. We've got major capital expenditure on new airports, on metros, on bus stations. We've also had further development. The capacity of the oil and gas in the region has increased dramatically. And there's been huge upgrades in the city centres, the major cities, as well as the towns. Riyadh is basically unrecognised from 10 years ago. Compared to now, it's a vibrant, busy, becoming a more cosmopolitan city. So there's been a dramatic increase, a big movement forward. And with the 2030 plans in place, that's even going to accelerate and move even further forward. So it's exciting times. Saudi's taken some brave and bold steps, and it looks like they're going to take even bigger leaps with the 2030 plan.
Okay. And as mentioned by Ash there, one of the main changes there is the role of women that are being introduced into Saudi Arabia's construction market. Chris, I want to come to you next on this question because Mark McDonald introduced a gender diversity event in Dubai recently as part of a partnership with the British Embassy. Unfortunately, it couldn't go ahead because of obvious reasons. But I'd like to get your perspective on this, on whether you're doing something similar in Saudi Arabia. Do you think there's appetite for these kind of events to promote women in Saudi Arabia?
Thanks, Ashley. Good afternoon, everybody. I suppose I'd like to start first of all by offering my condolences to the people of Kuwait for the passing of their ruler yesterday. We've got a full team in Kuwait, so it's quite a sad day for them there. Turning to your question, Ashley, I think there's across the world the participation rate of women in construction is a little over 10%, which honestly is not a great figure. And what we can see is that whilst the Middle East as a region probably started a lot less than that, has actually accelerated quite a lot in the last few years to probably just about meet that. So it's round about global average, but honestly, this is something that we all need to work on. As a business, McDonald Group is around about 30%, but honestly, I'm not proud of that either. There's no doubt about it that high-performing teams are characterized by the fact of being cross-gender and cross-culture, and we see this time and again. And what I can see is that KSA has started to pick up on this. The country itself has got a target of 30% participation rate of women in the country across the board, not just construction. So we've certainly got a way to go, but I see that the construction industry and those projects coming through as part of the transformation plan, particularly around the gigacities, can play their part. At the moment, the majority at a consultancy level, the majority of delivery is really at a design stage. Now, design gives us probably a better opportunity to involve females in the process of construction. So at the moment, I wouldn't say that it's Saudi Arabia is probably round about on par with the rest of the region, which is really good. Our challenge is going to be when these projects get through onto site and it moves through the supervision stage, which is really the stage where it has in the past been hardest to get that participation. That's going to be the real test. But listen, there is one opportunity that I feel is untapped out there, and that is that the amount of GCC nationals that are female going through university and colleges on engineering subjects is on a proportional basis, higher than many other parts of the world. The challenge is that when they graduate, they're not actually necessarily following through into a career in engineering or construction. So I don't buy the fact that the qualification is not out there. It is out there. What we need to do as an industry is actually to make it look like a far more attractive place, a far more welcoming place, and a far more accepting place for women to be part of this story. So I think that the absolutely the future for me around this particular subject is actually full of opportunity.
Okay. And Sachin, obviously Chris mentioned there that he said there was 30% of your colleagues at McDonald's are females. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes,
What you said then?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, Sachin, it'd be good to get, do you have a similar percentage at Reed Smith in terms of women colleagues? And Chris mentioned there that obviously there has been challenges. So, why do you think it has taken so long for women to be finally kind of recognised for engineering roles in the region, and particularly in Saudi Arabia? Good to get your perspective on this.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. And again, congratulations to Construction Week for hosting another excellent event and persevering through this period. I would find it very difficult not to endorse everything Chris has just said. I think the issue lies, I think, at a macro and, if you like, a micro level, and we can use policy for a large chunk of initiatives driving female participation. But the reality is the industry just doesn't have enough role models. It doesn't have enough of senior women and leadership positions to really inspire the people that Chris was talking about, those that hold very strong and academic qualifications, to then pursue that. And I think, even at a micro level, I think we just don't, or the industry doesn't do enough to create the environments to enable women both to participate in the industry, but also to do the other things which they need to do and they want to do. And I think until we increase training and job placements, we have policies to report discrimination, we bring inspirational leadership, it's going to be still an upward struggle. But I do agree with Chris. I think it is changing. We need to highlight success stories. I think the industry just doesn't do enough of that. It's not very good at its own PR, and that's where I think it falls down as compared to other industries. We need flexibility. We need cultural change. We need that sort of transformation. So it's across the board, but I do sometimes feel we don't often highlight, the very best that we do as an industry, and I think that is sometimes the reason we don't get the progression and women participation in the industry. I think is a case in point.
Okay, and Ash, do you agree with Christopher's and Sachin's points there? Do you think there needs to be more awareness in Saudi Arabia and for cultural change? Are you seeing this happening at all?
We're certainly trying to encourage it at our own kind of micro level, if you like. We're part of the Tamimi group, and we actively encourage women to come into the industry. We take on graduates. Last year we took on something like 50 graduates, and we put them through a program, a sponsorship program, just to bring them into the industry. And 50% of them decided to move on to companies like Aramco and SABIC. We take that on board, and this is fine because we're actively pursuing this agenda of trying to encourage more people into the industry. Interestingly, last year there was about 89,000 graduates in the engineering discipline, out of which 2% were female in Saudi Arabia. So there is a huge gap, not only for women coming into the industry, but even as an overall percentage. I mean, there was something like 1.19 million graduates, so roughly 7% were engineering graduates. So, the industry needs to do something to attract these people. And I think the government is certainly trying to encourage it, because they're trying to now, through other programs, initiatives, and through Saudiization, etc., encouraging companies from the 14th of January 2021. There's a requirement to have about 20% of local national Saudi engineers on board for every company. So this is one way to try and promote it, but I think it needs to be publicized a lot more.
Okay.
We had the same thing even in the UK. Actually, we had many years in my younger days. I'm not going to kind of go back and dwell too much on how many years ago that was, but it took a while to get women onto site. And I think the same thing is happening here. We're attracting women into our industry, but they'll end up taking accountancy jobs, or they'll end up taking marketing jobs. So we've got about 20% females in our office, but they're occupying those type of jobs. Trying to get them onto site or trying to get them into that type of environment is going to be the next challenge.
Okay. And John, just kind of summarize this part of the discussion again. What's sort of the outlook for women at HKA? Again, it'd be good to get a percentage of how many women are involved with HKA. What can you elaborate a little bit more to us about that?
Yeah, we're actively looking to improve not just diversity, but actual true inclusion. So we want to develop that. We want to give our resources, whatever their ethnic, religious, or gender background is, give them the right environment in order for them to achieve and exceed. And as the guys rightly noted here, is we need, at the moment, currently, what we need to do is allow that environment to create the future leaders that will inspire the next generation coming through and increase the number of female, or whatever the minority is, into engineering, into construction, into that field. And I think that by doing that at the moment, this is not a short-term, this is going to take a long-term commitment. And companies such as ourselves are very committed to make our environment somewhere where a female colleague will feel comfortable, will feel like their career will develop, will also make allowances for their family life and everything else. And I feel like, in my own experience, I can see Saudi, it has been a bit behind the times, but it's taking massive leap forward at the moment between the changes happening now, and that is opening a huge opportunity to previous generations didn't have that opportunity. So now with the way that the atmosphere and the environment is changing, it's becoming a more it's becoming an easier place for a female to get involved in construction at every echelon level. But I think we're still at the early chapters of this story, and we just need to keep an open mind and creating that environment to allow us to have those future leaders that will inspire the next generation coming through.
Yeah, excellent insights there from all of you there on obviously a quite topical subject at the moment within the region. But I want to move the attentions onto the next part of the discussion, where I want to delve in sort of the acceleration of entertainment projects that are cropping up in Saudi Arabia. Now, the nature of these projects are gaining a lot of traction and attention across the region. There's huge appetite for cinema construction at the moment, and there's theme parks being built in the likes of Qiddiya. So, Chris, as a consultancy firm, how much of an impact do you think the likes of cinema construction and theme parks are going to have on Saudi Arabia's market? And are you involved with any of these projects?
In terms of the not directly, but in terms of construction spend, I think it's the volume is really on the theme park piece. Clearly the market in Saudi is starting from quite a low base. Honestly, theme parks are not apart from you can probably separate out Dubai. It's not a big piece of the Middle East market anyway. And certainly in Saudi in the past, it was of course absent. So now these entertainment venues are coming on, and so we are seeing it as quite a big push. That's really because it's coming from a very low base. I think that what we probably need to do is what we're seeing is the broadening of that theme to be not just about entertainment, but really seeing that merge into a lifestyle play. And so what has really happened here is that as the world, if you like, has gone through the sort of the conventional cinema, fairground, if you like, theme park, and then started considering the more experience-led lifestyle venue, that what has happened in Saudi Arabia, they sort of jumped over those initial steps and it's straight into that theme of lifestyle. So rather than just a formal retail development, that is now becoming much more about the customer experience, and it does include certain aspects around entertainment, not just films either, but other entertainment facilities in there. So it's quite what we're seeing is actually quite a modern approach to it. And because there is a lack of those facilities in country, you're seeing quite a bit of it pick up. Again, proportionately, probably a lot more than other parts of the world or indeed region that have already got some of those facilities and assets in place, and clearly still have to let them run their course and their life cycle. In KSA, you've really got a new market around this, so it's actually quite exciting. And at the moment, it forms a reasonably large segment of certainly of the built asset output. Yeah.
Okay. And Sachin, do you agree with Chris's comments there? He said it's quite an exciting time for Saudi Arabia in terms of entertainment construction. So do you agree with these views? And why now in terms of these projects coming up? Why haven't they been built kind of previously?
Well, that is a question for others. I suspect that latter one. I think I hate to keep agreeing with Chris, but I will do. He's absolutely right. I think the view of entertainment and vision. Vision 2030 says it. It talks about entertainment being indispensable to our quality of life. And I think what we are seeing in a sort of socio-economic fashion is entertainment forming a fulcrum around that. I think if Saudi can achieve the development of an entertainment sector that leads directly to citizens being fulfilled in that sort of socio environment, that I think is a huge step forward, as against too many projects in the region in the past which have effectively been glorified real estate plays and haven't really endorsed the sort of the statement of quality of life. These should not be just real estate segments. They should be strong anchors to the development of a fulfilling approach to conditions and in a social sense in Saudi Arabia. So very much agree with Chris, but I think there will always be a temptation for people to peel off and try to turn them into straight vanilla real estate projects, and I think if they can avoid that, I think we could see some really exciting things happening. Okay.
And there's been a lot of talk at the moment surrounding the circular economy at the moment. I want to try and get everyone's opinions on this. So I want to find out from you, how Saudi Arabia used circular economy approaches, and how do you think this is going to affect the construction sector in the kingdom? Do you think there should be improvements in reusing waste, and has there been a response to this? John, perhaps you could start off.
Yeah. There's been big movement towards the Saudi Arabian government embracing a move towards a more environmental and sustainable future, and part of this will feed directly into this circular economy. Saudi is currently actively working with the UN on its new environmental targets, especially on its reusables, and considering how much capital expenditure is going forward over the next 8 to 9 years on these mega projects, and also the upgrading of the older facilities in terms of oil and gas, this will play a very, very important part in order to meet those targets and achieve the vision that Saudi has set itself as a more dynamic and environmentally responsible nation.
Okay. And Ash, as a subcontractor, you know, how do you think the circular economy is going to affect the construction sector in particular in Saudi?
I think there's as kind of John alluded to, there's a long way to go, and there are initiatives that are set up. You know, the Saudi Investment Recycling Company, which is, I think, wholly owned by the Public Investment Fund, is encouraging companies to get heavily involved in recycling, waste to energy management. But the big gains, and I know SABIC as well, have been working very hard, and they've opened a recycling plant in Germany. They're doing something in the Netherlands, and they're trying to encourage this here in Saudi Arabia as well. From a subcontractor point of view, I think, you know, for us, we're not directly involved, because these are usually organised and run by big EPC contractors. So we usually come in behind these guys to kind of offer some basic generic services. But the movement towards this is very, very important. And like you were saying yesterday, you were talking about some of the other big Geiger projects. NEOM is fundamentally based on some of this notion of creating a circular economy. And I think that's the way it's going to go forward. I think the big gains from an oil and gas, which is a sector we're heavily involved in, is the kind of waste you get from flares, you know, and from water which is created, and the brine that's created and then fed back into the system. So the potential for these areas is huge, and there's a lot of work to be done. So we're at the very, very early stages at this moment. But the initiatives have been put in place. Now it's a matter of time and development, I think. I think as SABIC is getting more involved, as Aramco have taken over SABIC, you know, I think the potential for opening up a whole industry and recycling and improving the kind of waste is something that will definitely have a big impact over the next few years.
Okay. And Chris, off air, you mentioned that there's been a lot of interest for the circular economy in Saudi Arabia. Can you perhaps give your thoughts, and do you agree with the other guys, what they've said?
Yeah, I think so. I think Saudi Arabia as a nation is doing really well around this. And Ash mentioned NEOM. Most of the gigacities have got the use of renewables, and the treatment of waste has been quite a big part of their let's say their reason for being. So I think that from that perspective, I think the nation is doing quite well. Honestly, I don't think construction industry has yet got an answer, however, to the circular economy. It's still very much a linear approach, and I think it's certainly over 30%, maybe over 35% of total waste in the region is down to construction. So I think the construction industry has actually got to come up to the mark. I think, as I say, I think the nation is doing really well in terms of those initiatives that are involved in the big developments that are going on. The construction industry has got to come to the mark. I think later on we're going to be talking about maybe the use of offsite. That certainly saves waste, and most of those organisations, in order to be competitive, they really need to look after every ounce of waste. So there, the motivation, I think, is far more aligned with the commercial aspects of what they're doing. But if we continually, in terms of built assets, if we continually construct in situ rather than looking at even precast or off-site, then it's going to be very difficult to really come up to the mark as far as the challenges around the circular economy are concerned.
And obviously, we all know that this year there's been a lot of difficulties and challenges with the impact of COVID-19, and then obviously that came with the oil price fluctuation as well, which impacted Saudi Arabia in particular. John, it'd be good to get your thoughts on this, on how you think this is going to affect the construction market in particular? And what do you think is realistic at the moment for Saudi as we approach 2021 in its recovery?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. I think there will be an impact. I think it'd be very naive to believe that this was all going to be resolved by the end of the year. I think there is going to be pressure on capital expenditure going forward into next year, and that's also going to limit the amount of future procurement and contracts being let, as well as some value engineering. I think people will see it mainly as a negative, but ultimately on our line of work, there is going to be a potential upside that if the time is used correctly, that extra time while waiting on the capital expenditure can be utilized effectively to de-risk projects, improve the design, improve the stress test in terms of the commercial viability as well as constructability, and not overcommit, rush things out to a very busy market. We've got now a bit of breathing room that we now can trickle out these projects as and when needed, and also it allows that the biggest issues we see in disputes in the Saudi market is contracts being let without the design being fully developed to a level that's suitable, and also very restrictive contract periods and very tight deadlines aggressively, and then finally commercially being unreasonable in terms of the terms of the commercial terms. If we can address the design issue in this period, and we can take a realistic look at the construction periods, that will de-risk a lot of the future projects led on, and allow us to deliver 2030 a lot of the plans of that on time and on budget by using this extra time to our benefit.
Okay. And Sachin, I want to come to you for the next question, because I think you'd be best placed to answer it. So there's been quite a lot of changes in procurement in Saudi Arabia. So there was a new procurement law that came into place last year. It'd be good to know from you, as our legal expert at the moment, how this has fared so far, and are Saudi developers and employers willing to work as stakeholders in the industry? Is there a need for variation management at all?
Yeah, Ashley, thank you. I mean, it'll be really helpful to hear from Ash in this regard, because he's very much at the coalface of this stuff. Look, I think it's too early to tell. We have had these this new regime really came into being at the end of the year last year. So, we've had so much of this year affected. I think what is useful to understand is why it came in and what it has actually brought. And so whilst it might be too early to talk about its effectiveness, I think one can anticipate that effectiveness. So really in relation to streamlining procurement and bringing transparency to procurement regimes, I think that's a massive step forward, because it was one of the largest complaints that existed in the industry, and also to bring the ability to introduce innovation into solutions when one tenders. I think that's going to be a game changer. So I think a lot of the guts of these regulations are very, very strong and sound. And then you've also got forward to the execution phase of these projects, again allowing more innovation, bringing an ability for the government body to pay subcontractors if there's a fight between the contractor and the subcontractor. Bringing arbitration as a dispute resolution mechanism, I think that's really, really important. I think that will give so many stakeholders far more comfort that if there is a problem, then people with strong technical knowledge can adjudicate a problem, and I think that will have wide ramifications, alongside the development of arbitration centres, which John in particular is very familiar around in the kingdom. So I think all in all, we have some really strong ground rules. I mean, I think it's also worth mentioning that the law does not apply to certain bodies like Aramco or SABIC or others. So there's a chunk of the market that it would not apply to us at present. But I still think it's a very forward-looking set of regulations, and time will tell. I just wanted to come back. If I quickly, Ashley, to a point that John made in that last question, I 100% agree. I think whilst there is time on our hands, it would be criminal to waste that. And I think what we are seeing, the positive side of the last few months in Saudi, is a lot of projects going through that sort of introspection, perhaps more realism being injected into programs. And I think that in itself could lead to a really strong delivery when we come out of this period. So, I mean, certainly we're hearing clients talking about much more stakeholder involvement now because they have the time to do it. And I think that's really positive.
Okay. And as Sachin said then, Ash, it'd be quite good to get your views on the procurement side at Riza Gulf Scaffolding. So what have you noticed so far?
There's a number of fronts. Sachin mentioned Aramco, SABIC, etc. So these very big organisations are encouraging. Aramco have a program. It's called ICTIBA, and this is they're encouraging local companies to manufacture, to produce goods, and they want local companies to procure from these companies on their projects. And there is a weighted point system, which then helps you to qualify for being able to tender for projects. And so we're involved in this as a subcontractor. We're having to qualify or pre-qualify for some of these contracts on this basis of our scores and our ratings as to how much we buy and procure internally within the kingdom. With this, there are some other initiatives where the government has created online bidding systems, tendering systems, where you have to disclose where you're procuring from, what sort of materials you're purchasing, and how much you're importing in. And then again, it becomes this kind of points-based system. So the drive clearly from these big organizations and even from government organisations is to encourage more local production and more local procurement within the kingdom itself. So we're seeing a big shift.
Okay, and I want to move along the next part of this discussion. Obviously, there's a lot of topics to discuss with this panel. So I want to move on to there's real big again, traction and interest for private and public partnerships at the moment. So, Chris, I'd like to hear from you. What's the appetite for PPPs at the moment in Saudi Arabia? Is there what's the comparison in terms of other markets, such as the UAE, for example?
Oh, it's as far as the KSA is concerned, it's PPP is concerned, it's really strong, and in terms of volume of those deals, far stronger than Dubai. But having said that, of course, the country is a lot larger. The ambitions around infrastructure development are also a lot larger. So we have seen over the last. So this isn't just really the beginning of the pandemic at all. This has been happening over the last couple of years. That the initiative around the considering the creation and delivery of infrastructure assets by the PPP has been a significant part of the consultancy market in KSA. I think there's the fundamental of PPPs, however, is first of all they need to be bankable. They do move quite slowly. So if you've got a project that needs to be delivered fast because of an urgent situation, or there's an urgent need of an asset, then PPP probably is not the answer for that. However, what I would say is that most of the time you can always test against that form of procurement. What you're getting is not just the not just a funding route, you're also getting the expertise of the private sector to really find the most efficient way to deliver that particular asset. And that includes not just the creation of the asset, it also includes the operation of that asset over a long period. So it certainly is not, it's not done because of a lack of cash up front from a government level. It's done for that value add. But honestly, in the region, KSA is the largest PPP market at the moment. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of a big upswing in that. Maybe Sash will disagree with that one, but that's what I think.
Sash, would you disagree?
No, I wouldn't. I'd certainly think, you know, on the point of bankability, I think, you know, Saudi provides a very strong bankability framework, if you like. I think the other point, perhaps, Chris, I ought to mention is, you know, the essence of PPP in whatever guise it is, and of course PPP can mean many different things. It is the ability to bring in private sector expertise and operate with a light touch from the public sector. And I think it doesn't matter whatever the sort of more conditions you have or apply to a PPP program. Ultimately, it is that sort of understanding that drives through the fabric of a PPP program, and so the ability for government perhaps to take a little step back and allow the private sector to innovate and bring its skills, and those countries that have allowed that to happen have been the most successful. But you know, we shouldn't forget that Saudi has had a rich history of delivering private and project finance through its PP programs. So the concepts are not unfamiliar to Saudi. It will be around bankability demand, but I think what we'll also see is if you look at the capitalization of many Saudi corporates, they are very strong and they can play a very leading role in PPP, unlike a number of other Middle Eastern countries where you still rely on the foreign sponsor. I think you've got an excellent opportunity with Saudi businesses to play a part, and that they of course understand Saudi risk and Saudi sovereign risk better than anyone, and therefore potentially you could have a very strong program built around the expertise and local understanding of the local business.
Okay, and again, I want to move on to discuss a little bit more about the details of the Vision 2030 agenda, which is obviously been very pivotal in driving all these sort of massive projects that are coming up. But again, I'm talking about COVID again, but it's obviously a topical subject at the moment. It's caused quite a lot of disruption and pressures on supply chains and finances and materials. So, John, as you're sort of again heading up the eastern kind of side of Saudi Arabia for HKA, what have you noticed in terms of, has there been any drop off in productivity in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, thanks. Great question. Look, initially, when COVID first unfortunately affected us, the impact was reasonably rapid. The borders closed quite quickly. That affected the import and export of materials. We also had travel curfews, restricted time frames in terms of attendance on site, and a lot of the mega projects in Saudi Arabia work on 24-hour construction, relatively lean procurement and material delivery methodology. So these have had a massive disrupting impact on contractors and subcontractors in some of the mega projects. Afterwards, there was legacy issues about labour, the demand for labour in the kingdom, and limited availability due to the immigration rules, and they were only now recently been slightly loosened. So we unfortunately, the market in Saudi Arabia has been dramatically affected over the last 6 months. And unfortunately, it's a part of COVID that financially cash flow has been impacted, and that has trickled down from capital expenditure to major employers, down into their contractors, and then on into subcontractors and suppliers. So we're seeing a multiple amount of issues and pressure that was being put on in relation to COVID and the measures in order to prevent the outbreak and spread further. However, on a more optimistic view, things seem to be moving in the right direction at the moment. Borders are starting to open, the visa processes are starting to reopen again. So we're hoping that a lot of these initial problems that we've had over the 6 months, we're coming to an end of those, and it should bring relief to contractors and subcontractors in the region.
Mm. And obviously, Saudi,
if I could just
yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that, Ashley, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, recently the figures published, I think, yesterday, showed, from what John was saying, they were showing a contraction over the last quarter of about 7% in the economy. But the upside is the expectation, one probably around the first quarter, is an expectation of an increase of around about 3%, 3.1%, which kind of falls in line with what John was saying. As the borders start to open up, as companies start greasing the wheels again, some confidence comes in, maybe some capital spend will start again. This will have this is critical, actually, and again, going back to what John was saying with regards to liquidity, this is a big pressure point for companies at the moment, because everyone is kind of delaying payments. There's issues with people doing the work, but they're getting delayed by the time they get paid. So this is again affecting everyone from the very top end, from EPC type contractors, all the way down to the bottom end of the food chain.
Okay, and Ash, you made a really good point earlier with regards to Saudiization for the kingdom, where you said that there's government targets being made for January 2021 for engineering roles to try and get more Saudis, on board for these projects. But do you think it is difficult to attract Saudis to these type of roles at the moment? And normally the option before is that they would recruit from abroad. So have you noticed a change at all there?
Yes, I think when from even a couple of years ago, I don't want this to sound kind of negative, but the desire that was prevalent a few years ago for many graduates to come into schemes has definitely increased so much over the last few years. You can feel the difference. It's tangible, and the people are keen. They're looking for jobs. The problem we have in the construction and the kind of oil and gas sector is, being able to get the kind of quotas that are being requested, and until the government kind of assist, I think, and there are some programs that do assist, but just to give you some kind of feel for what I'm talking about, on some Aramco sites, the requirements for Saudiization and encouragement of using Saudis on site can be as high as 70%. So this is a huge demand, because you have to consider it's not just about being able to hire people, it's also having the right type of candidate, the competency skills, well-trained individuals. By the time you pull all that together, the burden on the companies to produce this is quite high. So that's the kind of concern that we've got, especially as a subcontractor. How do we manage this? There's a kind of downward pressure on rates. The market is tight, so everyone is very, very competitive. And then on top of this, when you have this desire that you want to encourage more locals to be involved, but to meet these quotas, you've got higher salaries, you've got low competency rates, higher training, it becomes a bit more difficult. So the challenge is there. But on a positive note, we're very actively engaged. We're working with some government institutions, some local colleges, universities, and there's a couple of programs that assist by giving grants, or they give part payments towards salaries. So we're trying to take the benefit of this and bring more engineers on.
Okay. And we probably got time for one more question. So considering we're talking about the future of construction at the moment, what does the future hold for Saudi Arabia for its construction market? Do you think we're going to be leaning towards more technology-driven methods, and are we going to be sort of relying heavily on things like off-site construction? Chris, perhaps you could start us off with this.
Yeah, and I think that definitely the ambition is there, and in those locations that are well served with transport links, there's absolutely the opportunity for it. Offsite depends on a market, and that market needs to be generated by demand from the individual developments. And so there probably needs to be a real push from a government level to start the implementation of using offsite solutions, including precast and other design for manufacture componentry. One of the restrictions is that some of the gigacity developments are not well served by a transport link. So it would be obviously necessary to actually position any plant serving those projects very close in location. That's a lot of investment, and so we need to see if the market can actually make that work. But definitely across the corridor across the middle from Dammam, Riyadh, and Jeddah, absolutely this should be possible. It works in terms of a sustainability piece. It works around a health and safety, and as I said before, it also helps that circular economy argument too. At scale, and there are definitely time and cost advantages to get as well. So overall, it's an important, I believe it's an important component of the future construction in Saudi Arabia. I don't think the rest of the region has taken advantage of it sufficiently. I think there have been missed opportunities in other parts of the region in this respect. But I think that clearly Saudi at the forefront of the development has got the opportunity to actually make a difference there. So really for me, it's about that market has to be created through demand, and then the constraint is really to see how to get the logistics to work.
Okay. And Sachin, final words from you. What's your perspective on Saudi Arabia's construction market? Where do you see the direction of the kingdom going with regards to the construction industry?
Yes, actually, I mean, I think that just a couple of add-ons to what Chris is saying. I think from a lawyer's perspective, unsurprisingly, welcoming initiatives like the development of arbitration in the kingdom around the construction industry, I think that will be very, very positive. And alongside that, I think strong, robust documentation, clear contractual obligations established, perhaps an emphasis on a less adversarial relationship between stakeholders, and then looking at sort of more on the execution side, perhaps to develop and continue to develop what Saudi has been doing in project management, organization skills. I think this is where Saudi's way ahead of everyone else. I think it continue to develop its PMO skills in the industry, and local content. I think continuing to drive local content requirements and to create value in the local economy. So I think that is all very positive. I also think that the initiation of more technology into the industry, and that I think will have an impact on some of the things we discussed earlier. The drive to increase female and Saudiization in the industry, and more companies and construction companies see themselves less as traditional construction companies, but almost pseudo technology companies. So I think that's going to be very influential over the next few years in Saudi.
And I think we could talk for hours about this, but I obviously just want to get the final thoughts from John and Ash. John, what are your thoughts? Where do you see Saudi going?
Thanks, Ashley. I think it's very positive. I think we've made big gains in the last decade. There's a huge room for improvement still in sort of all aspects of what we covered today, between more leaner systems, better health and safety, more inclusion, and better use of our money and our time. I see Saudi making big strides forward. I think the want for change is there in the industry. I think we can make that. We can make those leaps and steps. And one of the things that I see over the last decade is that we're trying to become more transparent. We're trying to make it a more safer place, a more secure place to invest and develop. And by having these improvements in arbitration and improvements in procurement law and gradual improvements in all these other systems and facilities, it's allowing it to become a more definitely a place where people can now invest and believe that they're safe to develop and invest without to be worried about the systems that were in place working against them. So greater transparency, I think, is going to be a big part to play, but the kingdom is already making big movements towards that. So I've been encouraged what I've seen so far, and I expect it to continue.
Okay. And Ash, some final words from you?
Yeah, I would echo what John has just said. I think there's some big leaps and bounds we've seen over the last few years. I think Saudi Arabia is trying very hard to encourage investment in new technologies. I think this is coming, and I think this will help. Talking about what Chris was saying with kind of some of the modular designs, precast, this is coming in some shape or form. And how quickly will it be an accelerated program? I'm not entirely sure, but it's coming, and so I think it's very positive. And Sachin's views on arbitration and reorganising some of the contractual and legal obligations, this is a very big step forward as well.
Excellent stuff, guys. Really fascinating discussion there about the positive changes happening in Saudi Arabia's construction market. Chris, Sachin, John, Ash, thank you all for taking time out of your day. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for agreeing to take part.
No problem.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And we will be back with our final panel of the conference, which we're going to be exploring the rise of design and modular construction after a quick 10-15 minute break. We will see you all shortly.